Hello, friends. Today I want to continue with my reading of this book, A History of Expulsionism, Joy in the Bakumatsu Period in Japan. So I'm going to go straight to chapter 2, and I will now share the page on which chapter 2 begins. There you are. So off we go. Chapter 2, Bakumatsu Diplomacy and the Great Country Russia. The threat of Russia and external awareness or foreign perspective, Taigai Ninshiki. In the latter half of the 18th century, foreign ships began to appear frequently in Japan's coastal waters. The first threat came in the north from Russia's move southwards, mainly around Ezo, now called Hokkaido. When considering Japan's thoughts about and awareness of external matters, the movements of Russia cannot be ignored. An insight into the sequence of events, chronology, is linked to the sudden rise of new thoughts about external matters in the expulsionism of the Bakumatsu and an understanding of the changes in strategy. It is indispensable to a true appreciation of Bakumatsu expulsionism. Here I want to investigate the important relations between Russia and Japan. Russia's policy of expansion in East Asia began to accelerate in the middle of the 17th century, with an advance to the Sea of Okhotsk in 1638, through which all of Siberia was conquered. But in 1689, Russia concluded the Treaty of Nerchinsk with the Qing dynasty of China, by which the line of the border was determined to be the Stanovoy mountain range. By this treaty, Russia's further advance southwards towards Manchuria was blocked, so the point of the advance shifted to eastern Siberia. At the beginning of the 18th century, Russia claimed the Kamchatka Peninsula and began trading with the Ainu people. After that, as the Qing dynasty declined in strength, the 1858 Treaty of Aigun gave the north bank of the Amur River to Russia, extending the territory from the Stanovoy Range. Furthermore, in 1860, by the Treaty of Peking, Russia obtained from China the maritime provinces to the east of the Ussuri River, and so Russia acquired an unyielding sphere of influence in Manchuria. Through the Far East, Russia proceeded with its drive southwards, but in 1702, Tsar Peter the Great, ruled 1682 to 1725, ordered the exploration of Japan. In addition, Japanese castaways, Hyoryumin, were used as Japanese language teachers in the capital, St. Petersburg. At this time, Russia had absolutely no territorial ambitions, and the main objective was the expansion of trade. But behind this, there was certainly a spirit of adventure and the desire for fame, etc. Russia's exploration was impeded by the natural fortress of Japan, and Russians did not reach the Japanese coast. But during the rule of the 8th shogun, Tokugawa Yoshimune, 1684 to 1751, in office 1716 to 1745. In 1739, one survey ship reached the Bay of Sendai and another landed on the Boso coast, Chiba Prefecture. These were no more than chance occurrences, but they were the beginning of contact between Japan and Russia. Even so, many Japanese readers may be surprised at the fact that Russians came to our country as early as Yoshimune's time. Against the nuance of the word Sakoku, which means closed or literally chained country, this was something which actually happened, but the Bakufu shogunate and the common people were not particularly flustered and took it in their stride as a temporary event. After this, financial poverty and worsening relations, etc., with Britain, France, and Prussia caused the Russian advance in the east to come to a standstill. However, Catherine the Great, Ekaterina II, reigned 1762 to 1796, positively planned advances into East Asia, again demanding commercial relations with Japan, and she actively sent explorers there. Russians came south of the Kuril Islands, Chishima Retto, and in June 1778, Ansei 7, they reached Nokamapu in Nemuro, Ezo, Hokkaido, and Akeshi in the following year. They demanded trading relations from the Matsumai clan or domain, but were refused. After that, as mentioned in the previous chapter, Adam Laxman and Nikolai Rezanov came. The activities of critics, Keiseka. With regard to Russia's move southwards, in Japan it was mostly from intellectuals. Many of them were called statesmen, Keiseika, though this is probably best translated as critics, that alarm bells began to sound. These critics were aware of a crisis in the Tokugawa public order system and debated governing the world, saving the people, and concrete policies, etc., for governing the nation and providing relief to people, Taiseiininron. They were a group of intellectuals who held no power themselves, Zaiya, but who urged the awakening of those who did hold power, Issei-sha. The Issei-sha, of course, included daimyo, but many were high officials in the shogunate from the shogun down, including the following: the chief minister, Tairo, elders, Roju, magistrates or administrators, Bugyo, and inspectors, Metsuke. The Keiseika were warned for their criticism of the shogunate, and in some cases were punished for political crimes, Seijihan. Of course, in the background of the appearance of the critics, Keiseika, were the financial difficulties at the leadership level, depravity of social norms, impoverishment of farmers, etc. In fact, the actualization of various social contradictions. But the most important opportunity was the sense of impending crisis in the problem of national defense. As a result, the most important thinkers in our country's history began to appear in great numbers due to the threat of Russia. These ideas influenced various ideas in the Bakumatsu. In particular, there was a lot of emphasis on the importance of maritime defense, which cannot be ignored when considering external relations. It was indeed the mainstream of the formation of expulsionist thought in the Bakumatsu period. Here I want to discuss one part of this topic with reference to relations with Russia. First, I want to mention Kudo Heisuke, 1734 to 1801, of the Sendai clan, who was a medical doctor and a Keiseika critic. Kudo was a close friend of the Rangakusha, scholar of Dutch, Maeno Ryotaku, 1723 to 1803, Otsuke Gentaku, 1757 to 1827, and the Dutch language interpreter Yoshio Kogyu, 1724 to 1800. And he was particularly interested in the problems of maritime defense. In 1783, Tenmei III, he wrote the first book dealing with Russian research titled Aka Ezo Fusetsuko, Red Ezo-style commentary, and stressed the importance of northern defense. This book caught the eye of the elder Roju Tanuma Okitsugu, 1719 to 1788, and under the leadership of the Bakufu, the dispatch of groups to explore the whole coast of Ezo was realized. Hayashi Shihei, 1738 to 1793, was also a close friend of Kudo Heisuke. He was born in Edo as the child of a shogunate vassal. His elder sister became a concubine, Sokushitsu, of the head of the Sendai clan or domain, Sendai-han, and his elder brother served in the same domain. So in 1757, Horeki 7, Shihei also moved to Sendai. He was not a mere bushi or samurai, but was given the social status of lifelong unpaid supernumerary, Shusei Muroku Yakkai. And with this light burden of office, he frequently traveled throughout Japan to study. During that time, he became the close friend of leading Rangakusha, such as Otsuki Gentaku and Katsuragawa Hoshu, 1751 to 1809, and he also became intimate with the head, the Opperhoofd, of the Dutch factory trading post in Nagasaki. At that time, through these outstanding and broad friendships, he became familiar with the overseas situation. In 1785, Tenmei 5, Hayashi Shihei wrote the geographical and political book titled An Illustrated Survey of the Three Countries, Sangoku Tsuran Zusetsu, which commented on the three neighboring countries of Korea, Ryukyu, Okinawa, and Ezo, Hokkaido. He proposed the development of Ezo as part of a defense policy against Russia, and he made it clear that these three countries were important places for Japan, mainly to guard against Russia. It was a very political work. In the following year, 1786, Tenmei 6, he completed the discussion of military defense of a maritime nation, Kaikoku Heidan, which was finally published in all its volumes in 1791, Kansei 3. In this work, Hayashi proposed the defense of Edo Bay and the policy of rich country, strong army, Fukoku Kyohei, mainly against the southward advance of Russia. He was developing the original national defense policy, Kokuboron. Again, in the Sangoku Tsuran Zusetsu, which was a kind of manual for invasion, Shinryaku, of those three countries, he developed the idea of looking down on Korea, Chosen Beshiron. He praised the conquest of the three Koreas, Sankan Seibatsu, in the 3rd century, and Hideyoshi's invasion of Korea at the end of the 16th century. This is important as the starting point, Kiten, of the debate about foreign invasion, Taigai Shinryaku-ron, which developed into the debate about invading Korea, Seikan-ron. There should be greater awareness of the historical significance of Hayashi Shihei. The elder Matsudaira Sadanobu regarded Hayashi Shihei's works as dangerous and suppressed them. In 1792, Kansei 4, the woodblock prints, Hangi, were confiscated, Boshu, and he was confined to his home in Sendai. This was because Hayashi, indicating the lack of maritime defenses and also developing his own theory about national defense, represented a huge loss of face for the military government, which was the shogunate. In addition, the populace was agitated and there were strong feelings of wanting to criticize the Bakufu, which at that time did not have the courage to select Hayashi and make him responsible for maritime defense. Unfortunately, the extraordinary genius Hayashi died of illness in the following year, 1793. It is an irony of history that the Russian Adam Laxman sailed to Nemuro, demanding trading relations at almost the same time that Hayashi Shihei was confined to his house in Sendai. Critics, Shisoka, who should be marveled at, Kyotan Subeki. A critic in this period who deserves special mention as an absolutist thinker, agricultural politician, Noseika, and military scholar, Heigakusha, is Sato Nobuhiro, 1769 to 1850, a member of the Akita clan. In 1784, Tenmei 4, starting with a move to Edo, he went to study in many countries and avidly studied many disciplines widely including Dutch studies, Rangaku, Confucianism, Jukyo, medicine, Igaku, astronomy, Tenmongaku, and measurement techniques, Sokuryojutsu. In 1815, Bunker 12, he became a pupil of Hirata Atsutane and began to study Hirata-style national learning, Hirata Kokugaku, which was a great influence on the revere the emperor, expel the foreigner, Sonno Joi thinking. Furthermore, at this time, Sato renamed Edo to Tokyo and proposed the two-capital system, Nitose. In 1823, Bunsei 6, Sato Nobuhiro wrote the strange book Kisho, Confused Secret Policy, Kondo Hisaku. In this, he states the astonishing opinion that the Japanese Empire was the first country in the world and is the foundation of all the countries in the world, and when creating the world order immediately, all countries must become counties and prefectures of the Japanese Empire, with each country's leader becoming a vassal. In other words, Japan was the first state to be founded in the world and is the foundation of all countries in the world. As the foundation, if starting to form a world order, the whole world in an instant will become counties and prefectures, or part of the territory of Japan. All the emperors of the world can be made vassals of the Japanese emperor, and on this basic awareness, an argument for Japan conquering the world based on Japanese supremacy can be developed. This was extraordinary content which envisaged a concrete invasion policy from China through to Europe. Why did the Taiseiininron arise? During the Kansei period, 1789 to 1801, even though resistance to Russia was part of the ancestral policy of Sakoku, on the other hand, the Bakufu deeply desired peace and was not able to show its great military power, so a shadow began to be cast over its ability to govern. The elder Matsudaira Sadanobu wanted to repair the policy and attempted to substantiate the authority of the Bakufu by the existence of the court. The result was that the polity was recognized through the so-called Taiseiininron, the argument that the power to govern Japan had been entrusted by the emperor to the shogun. In other words, the Bakufu was graciously granted by the emperor and court not only responsibility for military, but also for political and economic planning and execution, and in response, the logic of governing Japan was born. The Bakufu was not governing because it liked or wanted to do so, but simply on behalf of the emperor in a just cause, Taigi-mei Bunron. The Bakufu was a cover for the authority of the court, protecting not only national policy, kokuze, and sakoku, but also attempting to prolong its own life. During the Bakumatsu, the end of the Tokugawa shogunate period, when there was a deepening confrontation between the court and the shogunate, the question arose of which body's orders should take precedence. Then, when the Bakufu brought forward the Taiseiininron in an attempt to win the argument, the Taigi Mei Bunron suddenly came into focus as a counter-argument. In this way, the Taiseiininron appeared in the political situation of the Bakumatsu as a very important concept, which also influenced expulsionism, joi, in the Bakumatsu. From the Kansei period, Kanseiki onwards, the Russian advanced southwards and demands for a commercial treaty became more intense. Laxman and Rezanov came to Japan, and in the Bunka period, 1804 to 1818, Bunka-ki, it was no exaggeration to say that foreign ships were in fact Russian ships. But when it came to the Bunsei-ki, 1818 to 1830, British ships began to appear in Japan's coastal waters, and as already stated in 1825, Bunsei 8, the Bakufu issued the Muninen Uchiharai-rei edict and hoisted the flag of expulsionism, Joi no Kishi. From national learning, Kokugaku, to late Mito studies, Koki Mitogaku. Until now, the account of the thoughts and written treatment of current events of critics, Keiseika, has mostly been about intellectuals, Chishiki-jin, feeling the threat of Russia directly in the northeast of Japan. This also included absurd content, but started with realistic northeastern problems, and Sato Nobuhiro's invasion theory is an exception. The majority were not so much concerned with positive advances, but with an awareness of defense and the question of national defense. But in their written treatment of current events, the position of the emperor was still vague. Nonetheless, in reality, the feeling of crisis caused by the advance of Western European powers, great famines, and the frequency of riots caused a buildup of social unrest. And in the face of these, the Bakufu's loss of military power and the poverty of its policies became clear. And this was the reason why, above the Bakufu and the intellectuals, the authority of the court unexpectedly came to the fore. The flow of events was first the prompting of the changed appearance of national learning, Kokugaku, and it was the spur in the Bakumatsu to the development of late Mito studies and revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. What is national learning, Kokugaku? In the Genroku period, 1688 to 1784, it developed from research into the study of classical Japanese poetry, waka, and classics, koten, and through research into the texts of the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki came into existence in the first part of the 18th century. It is an academic discipline which aims to discover the spiritual world in Japan's classics and ancient history. Chinese thought was, of course, excluded, also religions and philosophies of external origin, such as Buddhism and Confucianism, the study of Confucius. The existence of an unbroken imperial line, Bansei-ikke, of emperors itself was the basis of Japanese supremacy, and the court was more valued than the shogunate. The revere the emperor, Sonoron, and expel the barbarian, Joiron ideas were shared positions which further boosted the promotion of imperial thought, Ko Kokushicho. Kokugaku has four major promoters, Kokugaku Shiushi, namely Kadano Azumamaro, 1669 to 1736, Kamono Mabuchi, 1697 to 1769, Motoori Norinaga, 1730 to 1801, and Hirata Atsutane, 1776 to 1843. Of these, Hirata Atsutane criticized Shinto, which had absorbed elements of Buddhism and Confucianism, syncretized Shinto, Shugo-shita Shinto, and he advocated the imperial way, politics organized by the emperor, Kodo, to guide the people. Its religious and mysterious aspects were intense, and it made use of Confucianism, Buddhism, Rangaku, Dutch learning, and Christianity, and so Hirata Kokugaku was established. It also included ancient pure Japanese beliefs not influenced by Confucianism and Buddhism. In other words, he completed a revival of the old pure Shinto in his books Tama no Mihashira, Koshicho, Koshiden, etc. Hirata Atsutane's ideas were involved in the formation of late Mito studies and furthermore became a great support for the Sonno Joi movement. According to Hirata, Kokugaku strengthened the reactionary Fukko Shugiteki and nationalist Kokusui Shugi position. And as uncultivated national learning, Somo no Kokugaku, born of the common people, combining with the Sonno Joi movement, which sought political change, had a major influence on society. The main feature of late Mito studies, Koki Mito Gaku, is that it was a consolidation or combination of the various ideas and scholarship of the Edo era, which have already been mentioned. The Bakufu based its policy on Neo-Confucianism, Shushigaku, which was regarded as important to maintain a feudal society, Hoken Shakai, with its valuing of vertical, hierarchical relations and a mindset of esteeming politeness. Again, critical arguments were incorporated, and politics, economics, agriculture, national defense, etc., were discussed. In particular, arguments about national defense were emphasized. Sakoku was strongly maintained, and expulsionism began to be proclaimed loudly. In addition, Hirata-style Kokugaku was absorbed. East Asian-style Oriental expulsionism, which placed the emperor at the center, was grasped, and the sudden rise in reverence for the emperor, Sonnoron, was embraced. The permeation of nationalism throughout Japan was caused by this late Mito studies. Late Mito studies was the creation of the three great men of Mito studies, Mitogaku no Sanketsu, who were Fujita Yukoku, 1774 to 1826, his pupil Aizawa Seishisai, 1782 to 1863, and Fujita's biological son and pupil Fujita Toko, 1806 to 1855. Yukoku died before the Bakumatsu, about 30 years before Perry's arrival with the Black Ships, but he built the intellectual foundations of late Mito studies and planted it within the Mito clan, so he can properly be called the founder of late Mito studies for this achievement. In 1791, Ansei III, he wrote the pioneering book of late Mito studies titled Seimeiron, in which he opined, if the Bakufu values the imperial household, court, then the lords, daimyo, will revere the Bakufu, and if they do so, then the retainers of the lords, officials and ordinary clan members will respect the lord. According to this, the existence of the Bakufu was affirmed, and it was asserted that it ruled on behalf of the emperor in a just cause, Taigi-mei Bunron, which was reinforced through the Taiseiininron, the argument that the power to govern Japan was entrusted by the emperor to the shogun. While highlighting reverence for the emperor, Sonno, the system of shogunate and clans, Bakuhan Taisei, was skillfully protected, with the aim of prolonging the feudal system, Hokensei. Aizawa spread his master Fujita Yukoku's doctrines, expressing them comprehensively and systematically, not only within the Mito clan or domain, but widely broadcasting them throughout Japan. He organized Sonno Joi on a theoretical basis and wrote New Debate, Shinron, the greatest bestseller of the Bakumatsu, which had a great influence on the imperial loyalists, Sonno Shishi. The starting point, Boto, was that Japan is the country of the gods, Kami no Kuni. It is the country where the sun rises, the land of the rising sun, and the source of energy or vitality or life, Genki ga shojiru kuni. The emperor is the sovereign ruler, Genshu, not only of Japan, but the whole world. Imperial rule is the standard or norm or model, the kihan, for the government of all countries, and the light of the emperor's influence, power, authority, iko, shines throughout the world, and there is no place which it does not reach. Now, the barbarians of Europe and America, Obe Banyi, despite their lowly status, Hisen de arinagara, are running amok, honso-shi, throughout the world, trying to establish their authority, I wo haro toshite, trampling on many countries, shokoku no wo jurin shite, and without being aware of their serious error, are attempting to surpass our country, causing alarm bells to ring, keisho wo narasu. Also, however strong or great the enemy is, we must prepare with no omissions, banji teochinaku, to prevent their invasion of our country. However, the Bakufu has still prepared no policy at all with regard to the Western barbarians, Seiyo Banyi. It merely expresses consternation, shusho robai, and misses the opportunity and must be bitterly criticized. Criticism of the shogunate administration, bakusei, is seen everywhere in new debate, shinron, and is its greatest characteristic, tokushoku. Aizawa did not criticize the Bakufu in vain, but rather intended to inspire it to resist foreign pressure, gaiatsu, through national unity, kyokoku ichi. However, the result of his assertions was to support a debate about the abolition of the Bakufu, Bakufu Haishiron. Fujita Toko, 1806 to 1855, was the Lord Chamberlain of Tokugawa Nariaki, 1800 to 1860, ninth daimyo of the Mito domain, and active as a politician. He did not allow late Mito studies to remain a mere academic discipline, but put it into practice in the political world and succeeded in uniting scholarship and politics. Thanks to Fujita's activities, Mito became the sacred place of late Mito studies and played a pivotal role, chusu teki yakuari, in communication between the imperial loyalists who suddenly arose throughout Japan. Fujita Toko was at the center of this and was active as the key person in the nationwide Revere the Emperor, Expel the Barbarians movement, Sonno Joi Undo. Toko's intellectual inheritance from Aizawa was made clear in his work Kodo Kanki Jutsugi, in which he expressed the ideas of Mito studies simply, and the phrase Sonno Joi was used for the first time. Again, Toko's literary autobiography, Jijoden, titled Kaiten Shishi, which was often recited by Bakumatsu patriots, continued to make a deep impression. Late Mito studies provided intellectual preparation for the Bakumatsu, but Fujita Toko was crushed to death in the Ansei earthquake, Ansei Jishin of 1855, so its leading exponent was lost, and it began to go off the rails. Again, the loss of authority of the Bakufu caused late Mito studies, which involved not only reverence for the emperor, but also respect for the Bakufu, to begin to diverge, kairi, from the era. Nevertheless, the nationalism contained in late Mito studies continued to be valued in the Meiji era and survived until the Pacific War. In other words, it is no exaggeration to say that late Mito studies was established in the minds of Japanese people, not only in those of the patriots of the Bakumatsu who revered the emperor, but also in those of subsequent generations. In this way, Japan's maritime defense problem, which originated in Russia's policy of advancing southwards, caused great unrest and unease, and the Bakufu repeatedly applied an unstable external policy. Moreover, domestic policy was also failing, and the authority of the Bakufu was collapsing. On the other hand, the authority of the court rose suddenly. The Bakufu used that power and somehow aimed to prolong its life. The intentions of the court began to be directed strongly towards expulsionism. The preparations for the expulsionism of the Bakumatsu were thus being put in order. At this point, Commodore Perry appeared in 1853. The introductory remarks have been long, but at last we have arrived at the Bakumatsu period. This is the point where the expulsionism joi of the Bakumatsu begins. The policy of expulsionism, joi, was being put into practice, jiko sarete itta. Before discussing Perry's arrival, we should look at the situation starting with the Muninen Uchiharai Rei Edict to repel foreign vessels of 1825, Bunsei 8. As already stated, the trigger for the edict was the HMS Phaeton incident of 1808, Bunker 5, in which a British ship pretended to be a Dutch vessel and entered the port of Nagasaki, temporarily kidnapped Dutch representatives of the trading outpost, and searched a Dutch ship. The British used the capture of the Dutch ship as a pretext, but the real purpose was to demand supplies from Japan. The Nagasaki magistrate, who later took responsibility by committing ritual suicide, seppuku, organized supplies of food, fuel, firewood, and water in accordance with the British wishes, the Dutch representatives were freed and the warship withdrew. But this incident exposed the unexpected sloppiness of the Nagasaki Guard and the low level of awareness of maritime defense among the Bakufu and daimyos. From this time onwards, the foreign threat changed from Russia to Britain, and the Bakufu was tormented by this. After this, as already stated in Chapter 1, in 1824, Bunker 7, the 12-man crew of a British whaler landed at Hitachi Otsuhama, and all of them were arrested by the Mito clan. They were suspected of smuggling, but they only asked for food, water, and fuel, firewood, and 2 months later they were released. In the same year, another incident occurred when a British whaler came to Takarajima in the southwest of the Satsuma domain, demanding food, etc. When the clan officials refused, the British fired rifles and seized a cow. The Satsuma clan fired back and killed one of the British crew. This incident is not well known, but even though it was local, kyokuchi-teki, and isolated, sanpatsu-teki, it was the first clash of arms with foreigners in the Edo period, and so it was a groundbreaking incident, kakki-teki na jiken. The Bakufu was unable to tolerate this kind of attack by a British ship, and so finally it proclaimed the Muninen Uchiharai Rei Edict to repel foreign vessels in 1825. However, the Bakufu's tough stance ended in 1837, Tempo 8, with the Morrison incident. The American merchant ship Morrison came to Uraga at the entrance of Edo Bay and was mistaken for a British ship. The Uraga Magistrate's Office, Bugyosho, obeyed the Muninen Uchiharai Rei Edict and opened fire on the ship. After this, the Morrison entered Yamakawa port in Satsuma, Kagoshima, and here also was fired upon with warning shots and had to withdraw. As an example of expulsionism, this case of firing on a foreign ship was a major incident. Both the Bakufu and the Satsuma clan or domain had already executed the policy of expulsionism before the Bakumatsu and the coming of Perry to Japan in 1853. The Morrison incident is an important incident which requires special attention in Japanese history. 1 year after the incident, the Bakufu discovered that the Morrison was coming to Japan bringing Japanese castaways who had been held at Macau and also intending to trade and support missionary work. This caused great upset to the Bakufu, and they arrested two strong critics of their external policy, Watanabe Kazan, 1793 to 1841, and Takano Choe, 1804 to 1850. This was the so-called Bansha no Goku, literally indictment of the Society for Barbarian Study, a suppression of free speech in 1839. On receiving criticism of their handling of the Morrison incident and alarmed by the defeat of Qing China in the Opium Wars, 1840 to 1842, the Bakufu changed the policy of the Muninen Uchiharai expulsions, and in 1842, Tempo 3, it proclaimed an edict for the supply of fuel, firewood, and water to ships, the Shinsui Kyuyo Rei, which was limited only to shipwrecks, Sonan. The coming of Perry Raiko, and the holding fast to Sakoku Kenji. In the 10 years after this, until the coming to Japan of the US Navy Commodore Matthew Calbraith Perry in 1853, as before, Japan's coastal waters were full of foreign activity. For example, in 1843, Tempo 14, a Russian ship escorted castaways to Etorofu Island, and the British warship HMS Samarang landed on the Yaeyama archipelago and conducted some surveys. In the following year, 1844, Tempo 15, the French ship Alcmen came to Naha, Okinawa, to demand trading relations. In 1846, Koka 3, the commander of the American East India Squadron, James Biddle, came to Uraga with two warships, USS Columbus and USS Vincennes, and demanded trading relations. Furthermore, in 1849, Kaie 2, a British warship, HMS Mariner, appeared off the Uraga coast and conducted a survey of Edo Bay. These are just a few examples. The Emperor Kome, 1831 to 1867, who reigned from 1846 until his death, deplored the situation in which foreign ships came frequently to Japan. In 1846, Koka 3, he issued a command to the Bakufu called the Imperial Rescript on Maritime Defense, Kaibo Chokusho. The Bakufu immediately replied with a report on foreign ships coming to Japan. This was the first time that the court had spoken about external problems to the Bakufu. This became a precedent, and later, when it came to signing the Treaties of Commerce, the Bakufu requested imperial sanction. Then at last, Commodore Matthew Calbraith Perry, 1794 to 1858, came to Japan. On the 3rd of June 1853, Kaie 6, Perry came to Uraga in his flagship Susukehana, leading a total of 4 warships. His aims were to open up a commercial sea route over the Pacific Ocean to China for America, which had come late to the imperialist race for colonies, and specifically to demand main ports of call for ships. Another aim was to demand on behalf of the whaling industry, which was then at its zenith, protection for castaways and the supply of whaling ships, and to obtain ports of call for these purposes. Perry refused the demand that he sail to Nagasaki and instead went north to the Bay of Edo and carried out surveys in a repeated show of force. For this reason, the Bakufu met Perry on June the 9th at Kurihama in Yokosuka and received the message Kokusho sent by President Millard Fillmore, 1800 to 1874, US President 1850 to 1853, etc. But on this occasion, there were absolutely no diplomatic negotiations, and Perry left on the 12th, warning that he would return 1 year later. That's June the 12th. Yeah. The main reason for this was there was not more than 1 month's supply of water and provisions, and the Taiping Rebellion of 1851, Taihei Tengoku no Ran, had caused political unrest in China, meaning it was necessary to send warships. Also, it can be easily imagined that the Bakufu would take their time providing answers, and in case the Bakufu did not provide satisfactory answers before the ships were forced to leave, this would be interpreted as a Japanese victory, and there was cause for concern, Kennen Zairyo, that this would leave a great stain, or disgrace, oten, on the present mission. On the 14th of January 1854, Kaie 7, Perry hurried back to Japan after about 6 months away. The new US President Franklin Pierce, 1804 to 1869, was negative about his mission, and Humphrey Marshall, the US Commissioner to China, was requesting support from Perry's squadron, which caused friction between the two men, and Perry became increasingly frustrated. Shoso kan wo tsunoraseta. In order to meet this threat, the elder Roju Abe Masahiro, 1819 to 1857, appointed Tokugawa Nariaki, who at the time was an influential man, to be an advisor on maritime defense, Kaibo Sanyo, in June 1853, Kaie 6, in order to get him involved. Nariaki wrote many petitions in which he repeatedly emphasized Naisen Gaiwa, by which he meant that within Japan, a feeling of crisis should be stirred up and military preparations should be made while negotiations with foreigners were prolonged. It was a negative policy, sho kyoku saku, and a kind of delaying tactic, burakashi senpo. And here is Abe Masahiro. Image number 6. On the 1st of November 1853, Kaie 6, the Bakufu, anticipating Perry's return, issued a major order, Daigore, in which the policy, how he was to be treated, was made public. With regard to Perry's demands, no definite answer, either yes or no, was to be given. He was to be dealt with as calmly as possible, but with vague answers. It really was the delaying tactic known as burakashi senpo. It also urged readiness in case America should attempt to use force, and if by any chance America should open hostilities, sentan wo hiraku, there would be a universal effort to prevent the national polity, kokutai, from being dishonored, and general war would be declared on the Western powers. But the main intention was the delaying tactic rather than expressing any will to fight. While Abe Masahiro was consulting with Tokugawa Nariaki to decide external policy, the daimyos, shoko, shogunate, Bakkaku, and retainers of the shogun, Bakushin, were shown a translation of the US President Fillmore's message, Kokusho, and opinions were widely canvassed. It was a groundbreaking exchange of views, Genro Dokai, an attempt to guarantee freedom of speech, Genron no Jiu no Hosho. The majority opinion was in line with the burakashi delaying tactic, holding fast to the ancestral law, Soho of Sakoku, and prolonging negotiations while completing military preparations, i.e. playing for time. However, Kee-tah-kew-shoo, 1823 to 1899, and a few other retainers, stated that Sakoku had not been the ancestral law before the Kaie period, 1848 to 53, that trade should be allowed, and from the accrued profits, warships should be constructed, etc. And they proposed completion of military preparations by this method, but the shogunate did not listen to this minority opinion. On the 3rd of March 1854, Kaie 7, the US-Japan Treaty of Amity, Nichibei Washin Joyaku, was concluded between Perry and the Japanese plenipotentiary Hayashi Fukusai, 1800 to 1859. The most important point was that it avoided the topic of trade or commerce, tsusho, and it concentrated on amity. In other words, the US-Japan Treaty of Amity, which has been seen as opening the country of Japan, in the eyes of the Japanese of that time, was in compliance with the Sakoku policy. Indeed, even though it was a formal treaty between two states, before this there had been the edict for the supply of fuel, firewood, and water to ships, the Shinsui Kyuyo-rei, and in the tempo period, and the content of the present treaty was not inconsistent with that way of thinking. This was the merciful and loving or humanitarian policy, Bujutsu Seisaku, which was a policy in between Sakoku and trade, but in the end it was within the framework of Sakoku. 1 year and a half later, Emperor Kome Tenno, approved it, so it was recognized by contemporaries as maintaining the Sakoku system. Perry was seeking trading relations and appealed to human rights, but Hayashi defeated him in argument and firmly refused, gaining Perry's acceptance without any problems arising. This is proof that the Bakufu was not merely focused on weak diplomacy. On the other hand, it is also a fact that America did not expect much from trade with Japan, and in President Fillmore's message, it was clearly written that trade could be tried on an experimental basis for 5 to 10 years, and if no profits were seen, then the previous situation could be restored. The Bakufu succeeded in upholding the Sakoku policy for the time being, but the countdown to the opening of the country, Kaikoku, had begun. Abe Masahiro and the Ansei reform, Ansei no Kaikaku. In these difficult circumstances, let us now discuss the elder Abe Masahiro, 1819 to 1857, who was forced into making the first major diplomatic decision, Saisho no Okina Gaiko Teki Ketsudan. Abe became an elder Roju in 1843, tempo 14, at the age of 25. He held that rank until his death in 1857, Ansei 4, and he controlled the shogunate, the bakusei, of the 12th shogun Ieyoshi and the 13th shogun Iesada. Abe carried out the Ansei reform, but the fundamental plan, Kihon Koso, was to abolish the system of hereditary daimyos, Fudai Monbatsu Seido. In other words, to modify the dictatorship of the Bakufu with its system of elders, which had been monopolized by the hereditary daimyos, Fudai daimyo. To do this, he obtained the cooperation of the court and the most powerful daimyos, the 3 branch families of the Tokugawa house, Gosankei, the extended Tokugawa family, Ichimon, and the outer lords, Tozama Yuhan, and planned the construction of a system of national unity, Kyokoku Ichi Taisei. In the background was the inability of the Bakufu to confront and deal with diplomatic problems due to its serious lack of military power. Together with Shimazu Nariakira, the head of the Satsuma clan, Matsudaira Yoshinaga Shungaku, the head of the Echizen clan, and Date Munenari, the head of the Uwajima clan, Abe made Mito Tokugawa Nariaki a councillor, Bakusei Sanyo, and recommended Hitotsubashi Yoshinobu to be the next shogun. As a concrete measure to work full-time on problems of diplomacy and national defense, the post of official in charge of coastal defense, Kaigan Bogyo Goyo Kakari, Kaibo Kakari, was created, and for the children of vassals of the shogunate, a military training organization called the Kobusho was established. In addition, Egawa Hidetatsu, or Taro Zaemon, 1801 to 1855, was ordered to construct a gun battery at Shinagawa Daiba. In this way, it was aimed to strengthen coastal and military defenses. With regard to various clans or domains, the 1635 Kaie 12 order prohibiting the construction of large ships, Taisen Kenzo Kinshi-rei, was abolished, and the strengthening of coastal defenses was ordered, again in an attempt to throw open the doors of education not only to sons of the retainers of the shogunate, At the state or national level, the Institute for Studying Barbarian Books, Bansho Shirabesho, a research organization for Western learning and diplomacy, and the Nagasaki Naval Training School, Nagasaki Kaigun Denshujo, for the training of naval officers were founded. Of all Abe's measures, his most important one was the selection of talented people, Jinzai Toyo. For example, he selected Katsukaishu, Okubo Tadahiro or Ichio, Iwase Tadanari, Kawaji Toshiakira, Egawa Hidetatsu, Nakahama Manjiro, Takashima Shuhan, Nagai Naomune, Tsutsui Masanori, Mizuno Tadanori, and others. Many of them were appointed to posts as inspectors, Metsuke, and coastal defense officials, Kaibo Kakari. After that, in the Ansei Purge, Ansei no Taigoku of 1858, they were dismissed and oppressed in other ways, but for the time being, they assisted Abe in controlling the shogunate, mainly with regard to diplomatic problems. Abe's administration pursued an open policy, soliciting opinions on diplomatic problems from all quarters, from the outer lords, Tozama daimyo, down to the common people, shomin. The result was that debate extended beyond social position and organizational frameworks, giving rise to a trend of irresponsible criticisms of political matters by private citizens, shoshi ogi, and a base was formed for public and open criticism of the shogunate. The Ansei reform gave a breath of fresh air, ippuku no seiryozai, to the shogunate and was perhaps a chance for it to recover, but at that very moment, the reign of terror of the chief minister, Tairo Inosuke, 1815 to 1860, began, and all the gains were lost. Forced signing of the treaties, Joyaku Choin no Kyoko. Abe Masahiro died suddenly when in office as an elder, Roju, in 1857, Ansei 4. On a recommendation, Hotta Masayoshi, 1810 to 1864, became his successor as head of the elders, Roju Shuza, and elder responsible for external relations, Gaikoku Kakari Roju. What lay in wait for him was the problem of the commercial treaties. Here's image 7, Hotta Masayoshi. Following the US-Japan Treaty of Amity of 1854, which America was intending as the precondition for the conclusion of a commercial or trade treaty, attacks from the first US consul in Japan, Townsend Harris, 1804 to 1878, intensified, and the Bakufu was aware that it could not avoid these. This was a deviation, itsudatsu, from the Sakoku policy, and implied a reform of the national polity, kokutai. For this reason, before concluding the commercial treaty, Hotta consulted many daimyos and also attempted to obtain an imperial sanction, chokkyo. Taking Iwase Tadanari and Kawaji Toshiakira with him, he went himself up to Kyoto, chokkyo shite, and confronted Emperor Komei and the court, who were behind a brick wall of expulsionism. Furthermore, Matsudaira Shungaku sent Hashimoto Sanae to Kyoto to support Hotta and to lend his good offices to the choice of Yoshinobu as the next shogun, but neither of these petitions moved the court. Regarding the problem of the succession of the shogun, the hereditary daimyos, Fudai Monbatsu daimyo, felt a sense of crisis, and the shogun's wives, O-oku, wishing to avoid the intervention of Mito Nariaki, the daimyo of Mito and father of Yoshinobu, combined to assert the importance of the hereditary principle, a bloodline or pedigree, ketto. At this point, the chief minister, Tairo Inosuke, appeared, and clouds suddenly began to gather over Hotta and the future of the enlightened parties, the Kaimei-ha coastal defense, Kaibo Kakari.